Okay, so we are going to start. Bonsoir, good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to welcome you for this new session of a webinar organized by ABG. The topic today will be research opportunities in France. And before starting, I would like to thank our partners for this event, the French embassies in the US and Canada, as well as the French Association of PhDs in North America, and last but not least, the Association of Euraccess in North America. Many thanks for your support by organizing and communicating on this event. This event, as I said, is organized by ABG, which is a major stakeholder in France for the recruitment of PhDs and their career development. That's why we are organizing such events to help you find your way after your PhD or postdoc, and also maybe to try to attract you to come to France because we have lots of things to offer in France as a researcher, and that's why we invited 4 great speakers. Thank you very much to our 4 speakers, all female speakers. Thank you very much once again for your availability and for having kindly accepted this invitation, for sharing your experience with our participants. Many thanks. Just a few things about how this event will be organized. There will be a first part, more or less 1 hour, where we are going to discuss all together, speakers and myself, by asking some questions just to give some inputs for the further discussion that takes place in the second part. And in this case, you will be given the floor, so you can ask directly your question to our speakers, but I'm going to explain to you later on how it will be organized from a technical point of view. So let's start with this topic of research opportunities in France. And before starting, I would like our speakers introduce themselves. So I'm going to give the floor first to Lydie. Can you please present yourself, who you are, what you have done until now in 2 minutes, I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everybody. Nice to be here in this interesting session. So I'm Lydie Jeu, and at present I'm Research and Innovation Manager in LVCIS, and I'm also a grant manager. So I hold a master degree in physiology, pharmacology, and neurosciences. I then did a PhD in immunology, oncology at the University of Limoges. I did all my studies in France. After my PhD, I've been a research engineer for 1 year in CNRS. And then I've been trained as clinical research associate. And 4 years ago, I joined LVCIS, so I turned into industry and not academia. So we'll speak about all this later.
Thank you very much, Lydie. Mathura, can you present yourself, please?
Sure, thank you. I'm Mathura Shanmugasundaram, and I'm very happy to share my experience here. I did my undergraduate in life sciences with a specialization in biomedical sciences at the National University of Singapore, and then moved to Paris and did my PhD in genetics and molecular biology at Institut Pasteur, Paris. Following which, I got a chance to come to the US and I did a postgraduate program in clinical trials and canceromics. And this was a nice bridge to kind of bridge my lab-based academic experience to clinical trials. And I then transitioned to the industry as a medical science liaison for a pharmacogenomics company, company that was co-started by Mayo Clinic in Minneapolis. Then moved around in the industry to BioVerativ and then to Sanofi. And currently I am working in global medical communications, scientific communications in neuroscience in a biotech company called Biogen based in Boston. Yeah, and happy to share more over this call.
Thank you, Mathura. Naomi, that's your turn.
So I'm Naomi Taylor. I'm American. I grew up in New York and I did all my studies in the US. I did an MD PhD here and was working in both research and clinical care in immunology, infection, and transplant, and met my significant other who's French and also a scientist. And it was a question of 2 positions for 2 people. And I didn't speak a word of French. And I decided, what the hell? I moved to France in '96 and got a tenured position in France through the Instrom CNRS system, which we can talk about as an academic. and spent 20 years running a lab there and being assistant director of an institute in Montpellier. And right now I am a in the pediatric oncology branch at the National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, but maintain an association as an adjunct professor with the University of Montpellier. So I'll talk about some of that if you'd like.
Thank you very much. And Sarah Witt, that's your turn.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think it's a really interesting aspect of sharing experience in France and the States. So I did all my studies in the US. I did my PhD in biomedical sciences at Washington University in St. Louis. And I came to France to do a postdoc at the Institut Pasteur in Paris. But I moved on from the bench to research policy while in France. So my experience is really going from the really lab experience to a research policy and global health. So be happy to share all that.
Great, thank you very much to all of you. So let's move to the core topic of this session, research opportunities in France and how attractive France can be for international researchers. So we'd like to address this question to our international guests. So sorry, Lydie, you are a little bit left aside for the moment, but the question is really addressed to Mathura, Naomi, and Sarah Witt about the reason, about your experience in France as international researcher. I would like to know why and how you chose actually France for your research or for your career development, and which benefits do you see, maybe right now, but maybe at the time where you were in France, which benefits did you get from this experience in France? Can you tell us more about that? We start maybe with you, Sarah Witt.
So as I said, I did my PhD in biomedical sciences, and I was in St. Louis, which is, for those of you who don't know St. Louis, it's a small Midwestern city, which is really warm and nice. But at the end of my PhD, I felt like I needed to grow up and go to the bigger city. So I was looking for postdocs, but also at the back of my mind, I was really interested in policy and research policy. And I was tempting my ways here and there. And for those of you who don't know, there's also the AAAS fellowship for global research policy development, which is very competitive. And I tried to get in, I didn't get that. And I was looking for postdocs. So I had a couple of offers in the States, in Long Island, in Texas, and then in France, because that came about because it was a decision of wanting to go explore a different area, different environment, different setting. And I had a French, I was taught French early on. My whole school was in a French system. So the language wasn't a barrier. And I was really attracted to the French way of life, with the baguette and all that. So that's how I got interested. And in terms of why specifically Institut Pasteur is because with doing that transfer, I also wanted to make sure I was working on my career and also the pedigree of where I was coming from. I came from a very well-known lab at WashU, and I wanted to be in an international setting. So Institut Pasteur was kind of the right way to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Naomi, can you tell us about this?
So as I mentioned before, I don't think I ever knew where Montpellier was on the map. I'd heard of Montpellier, Vermont or Virginia. I didn't speak a word of French. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but I thought it'd be an interesting adventure. And I have to say it was really fantastic. I was also in a privileged position because I had a position at the Children's Hospital of LA, and they gave me a year leave of absence. I came to Montpellier really, as I said, not even being able to say the word pain or bread. I'm not sure that anybody understood me. And I think that the one thing I'll say is that the French system is incredibly open to foreigners, incredibly open to people coming from different backgrounds. I applied for a tenured position. This is a position for life. I didn't speak a word of French when I applied. I had the opportunity to present my research in front of a group of incredible immunologists and hematologists, many of whom have since become friends and all of whom have become colleagues. And it was just a wonderful experience. I got the position, and I would say that there's a huge amount of advantage, and we can talk about that later, as compared to an American system where even if you have tenure, if you don't have a grant, it means that you may not have your salary. So there are lots of differences between the salary system in the US and France, but once you have a tenured position, you have it for life. And as long as you really do what you're supposed to do, which we all love what we're doing, so I don't think it's a problem, you have a job for life and you're able to do what you love. So when I came, I was 33, 34. I got a tenured position at that time and was able to start my lab really rapidly. And I would say that, you know, compared to what Sarah Wheat just said about Pasteur, even in a place like Montpellier, which is much smaller, the institute where I am, where I was, has, I think 30% of the group leaders have are foreigners or were born in other countries. Some have French citizenship right now. And I've had just in my own lab in France, I had people from, I think, over 40 different nationalities. So it really is amazing, you know, how we can bring people together. And I think that's one of the most wonderful parts of science. Boundaries don't exist. If our world could do a better job with that, we'd be in a better place. But that's my political statement.
Thank you, Naomi. Mathieu Harp, that's your turn to tell us why you chose France and which benefits did you see in this experience.
Yeah, I think, you know, I got to reiterate what Serviette and Naomi was saying. It's true that I think France has been so open to international, I think, students and scientists. I remember going for my interview at Pasteur. So they have, I was part of the international PPU program, they call it, Pasteur Paris University program. And they flew a couple of us down for a 1 week long interview. And I think that was great just because it showed their interest and really the investment they were putting in terms of like time, effort, everything in bringing all these international students and, you know, giving us an opportunity to also interview, you know, the Institut Pasteur as it is, you know, and to learn about the international programs they have. And there was a community and network of international scientists and students that we got to meet and interact with during this time. And I think it gave me a lot of strength and really a motivation to know that there was a guidance and a network in place. And, you know, like Naomi was saying, I didn't know a word of French when I went as well. So it's always a very scary thing. And I think many people on this call might be thinking, especially if they don't know this country, that it's a challenge, right? But I think there's a lot of things in place to make it easy. And I saw that when I went there. And again, you know, another thing was that I had grown up in Singapore and I really wanted to experience a different culture along with, I guess, doing my PhD abroad, and wanted to challenge myself in a way to be in a non-English speaking country. And that kind of motivated me to also look at, you know, European countries and I, you know, and learn a new language along the way. So that was kind of my motivations to go to France. I think the interview process was amazing. It provided me all that I needed to know. And I think, you know, France in general just has its own appeal, right? So, yeah.
Just maybe about what you have just said, you had the answers to the questions you had all the answers you needed to know. Can you tell us more about what you were expecting, and maybe to give some advice, and the question is also open to other speakers. What kind of information do you need to prepare your mobility to a country, foreign country, but also to France? What was very important for you to know before moving to France, for instance?
And I can start. I think, you know, just kind of leading from the previous stuff that I said, not only during the program, but I think ahead of just going to Paris, there was a lot of contact points with them and connections where they mentioned about, you know, simple things like administration. We all know it can get very difficult, especially if you're not French, on doing your visa and carte de séjour and, you know, medical and all of that. So that was something that Institut Pasteur was very well equipped with. They had, you know, they had a system in place. They had all these admins reaching out and helping us with that process. Another was, I think, they really demonstrated how well structured the program was. So it wasn't that we were only connecting with our supervisors for our PhDs, but they also connected us with tutors throughout the program, and they had very good funding, or they communicated everything very well. That definitely gives you more assurance going to a place. They also had, as I remember, French speaking classes just for you to integrate, and definitely letting us interact with the other international students and scientists, giving us already a network as we start. And I think that was really very instrumental in me making my decision, at least. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Natura. I don't know if someone would like to add something on that point. Sarah, please.
Yeah, I think it's important to feel welcomed when you're moving or changing your environment. And I think one other aspect which is important when you're planning your mobility is funding. It's easier to go into a lab when you have a fellowship already in hand or something like that. So at the time, there's a Pasteur Foundation, which I think is still existing, which is it's an American funding, which encourages Americans to come to France to do a postdoc, and specifically to Institut Pasteur. So that's one of the fellowships I got, and which allowed me to come and not have to worry for 3 years about funding and be integrated in a lab. I think that's important to know. And so I would recommend seeking out different funding opportunities.
Naomi.
So I think, especially in academic research, the experience that you will have is really dependent on the laboratory that you go to. And I think every lab has a different ambiance, a different, way of doing things. And every lab is going to be different. And just like a lab in, Hong Kong, US, Australia, Israel, Europe, it depends on where you end up. And so I would say that I think that if you're going into an academic position, that it's really important to make sure that you speak to lots of different people in the lab and try to get an idea of what's going on. But I would say that advice is not specific to France, it's specific to any lab. And I make sure that everybody who comes into my lab really speaks to lots of different people, because you're taking a much greater risk by coming to somebody's lab than the person who's running the lab. If a student doesn't work in my lab, it's unpleasant for me, it's a pain, but it's not going to change my career. Whereas for the student or the postdoc, it can really change your career. Coming back to one of the things that Sarah Wheat said about funding, I think it's important to know that when you look at the salaries that are offered in France for postdoctoral fellowships, when I saw the salary that I was being offered, I have to say I laughed, okay? And the reason why I laughed was because it was less than what I was making as a PhD student, not to mention as an MD. But I do think that you need to look at salary support in France with an open eye, because in the US, my salary is probably 4 or 5 times higher than what it was in France, but that doesn't tell the whole story. The whole story is that if you work in the French system, you can, if you work the number of years before your retirement, you can actually finish with 70% of your salary in terms of pension. But even forgetting about retirement, university, and I tell this to my friends here and they all go into shock, university is 340 euros a year. And that includes health insurance. That's unheard of in the United States. There is no such thing as catastrophic health. If you need healthcare, you get healthcare, period. You don't have to think about paying for it. So whereas your salary support is much greater in the US, the support that you get and the fact that you would get unemployment, for example, if you didn't have a job, is so much different than what it is in the US that it's very difficult to compare the structure. So I can give you some numbers. The take home that you would get for a postdoctoral fellowship in France could be, somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 a year, which for the US would be considered really little. But if you're not making that much money, you will also get support for housing. Even if you're a foreigner, the French government will give you support for housing. And again, you don't have to worry about lots of different things. Just going to a gym is, probably 1/10 of the price is what it would be in the US. So it's important to keep that in mind when you look at the salary support.
I would like maybe to give the floor to Lydie because you haven't spoken until now regarding this integration and welcoming part of researchers, for instance, in your industry, in your company, because you were moving your head. I suppose you were agreeing with everything what I said, but maybe can you tell us more about how you check that someone, or how you integrate new people in your company? And then I will move to the next question regarding funding, because it has been already mentioned by some of you. What are the funding opportunities? And for such question, I would like to focus maybe on Lydie and Sarah Witt. Lydie, for the EU funding project you are working on at LVCs, and Sarah Witt, because you're working for kind of funding agency, but also this question is really open to the other speakers. Lydie, can you start first with the integration part of your new colleagues and funding?
Of course, because integration is also a kind of part of the funding, because we are hiring, I would say, or working with a lot of international PhD holders, postdocs, that come from all over the world, especially because we apply with them to a joint application. We make a joint application to the Marie Curie individual fellowship. So this fellowship is funded by EU and is aimed at enhancing the career of researchers, experienced researchers or young researchers. So giving them new skills, either scientific, either soft skills. So once we get funded, those researchers from everywhere come for 2 years in the company. So we have many different nationalities now and many different topics, scientific topics. And they all are very well integrated because we function as a team. The unit where I am is called the Innovation Unit, and we work all together, even if we have different topics. And there is what we call the integration cycle inside the company, so that people arriving in the company can understand each unit and what is done in each unit of the company, to have really an overview of the whole company, the whole work that is achieved, and this way to understand more how it functions. And they also have French courses, of course, and we have a lot of activities all together. So we are really linked. It's not only work. And I could say this because of the confinement. We are all in contact via WhatsApp, and of course, we all speak English all the time. We don't speak a lot of French inside the company. So English is the language that is used inside the company because of all the nationalities, and it's not very easy for them to learn French, I would say, because even if they go to French courses, they cannot really train them to French while working in the company, because we all speak in English. But we have this integration phase, and they all seem very, very glad to be here. So I don't know if I can improve a little bit the explanation on the fellowship, or
yes, you can.
Yeah, so the fellowship, you need to make an application. It's a joint application between a researcher, highly skilled researcher, because this is an EU funding. It's really toward excellence. So you need to have a really excellent CV, nice publications and great achievements. And to come, of course, if you apply in a company, it means that you want to change focus, to leave academia for industry, because once you come in the company, you learn how to transition and how to create a product from an idea. So it's a different way of thinking than in academia. But your academic skills, I would say, your scientific skills are not lost, because at least in our company, we are making products and applications based on scientific needs. So we need the scientific skills from academia, and we need to make a product based on the need that academicians could ask. It's really an exchange of skills between the researcher and the company. So generally, we are contacted, or we contact researchers who want to work with us. We write a proposal together. It's a 10 pages proposal. So it's a proposal that really needs to be written by the researcher, because this is the project of the researcher, of course, with the help of the company, because the company is the place where the fellowship will be achieved. So it's also the place where the science will be done, and the researcher will benefit from the skills of the company. There must be a two-way transfer of knowledge. So the person coming will come with his skills, and we can provide him with the complementary skills. So in our case, the microfluidics. And then based on a project that the researcher wants to develop, we write a project together, and then we submit. And only if it is funded, then the researcher can come for 2 years inside the company and work with us. So for now, I guess we have maybe between 8 and maybe 8 individual fellowship running in the company. And all the fellows are working in their own project. It's a more applicative projects trying to develop platforms or diagnostic tools based on, for example, the disease that they studied previously in their academic life, I would say. So we have, for example, a researcher who's trying to develop breast cancer on a chip in order to test drugs. So of course she needs to use her knowledge on cell culture and drug testings in order to develop such platforms. So we have many different projects like this, and this is really interesting for us and for them.
Great, thank you very much, Lydie. Just for the participants and attendees watching the session, I will send after the session the link to review or rewatch this session, but also the link to these fellowships Lydie has mentioned, just for you to better understand what it is and how you can apply. I will send you the link afterwards. Maybe I move to Sarah Witt, because you're working for SIDAction, which is also awarding some grants for researchers. Can you tell us which grants and how can researchers apply for these fellowships?
So as I said earlier, SIDAction is an NGO that actually also funds research. It funds HIV-related research. It's very specific. So what I might describe as a process might not apply to other funders. But in my former life, I also worked for an agency that funds research in France. So I can probably link those two. So at SIDAction, we have 3 schemes, funding schemes. One is what we call a dos équipes. It is a research group that applies for funding. So any type of research, it could be biomedical, basic research, up to social science or epidemiology related science. And there's another funding scheme, which is Jeune Chercheur. It's a young scientist. So it's really targeting postdocs, early postdocs. So it's a funding up to 2 years working on HIV, and it's a nominative funding, meaning it's actually awarded to the person. So it is managed by the lab and the institute, but it's the person that applies, not actually the research group. So that's really important for us, because that's also funding a researcher or a young scientist is very important, but also accompanying him in his career development is another added value that we have at SIDAction. So we organize different seminars. We organize also every 2 years what we call Université de Jeunes Chercheurs. It's a way for us to make sure someone who's in a certain type of an environment, it could be a biomedical basic scientist, will have to have a wider view or grasp the actual challenges and objectives of what working in HIV field means. So you have to get into familiarize with the social context, political, and also the other aspects of research. So that's a 1 week long training, basically. And we also mix France-based scientists with African-based young researchers. It's an amazing program, which everyone comes out really reinforced and further engaged in his research project. Then we also have a similar funding, but specifically for PhD candidates. It's similarly organized, meaning it's a candidate that applies. Of course, it has to be within a lab setting and within a lab project. That's how we organize the funding. That said, in France, there are 2 organizations funding research on HIV, which is SIDAction specifically as an NGO, and then there's a public funder, which is INRS. So we also work with them in terms of making sure we cover most aspects of the research that's carried out. We mostly fund research in France, but we also fund some type of research and collaboration in sub-Saharan Africa and other developing countries. That is, as I said, specific to SIDAction, but you also have the national funding system, which is not necessarily individual oriented, but where a lab can apply for a position, a postdoc position in his lab, then he's going to go recruit someone. That, like anywhere else in the world, it helps to have a network. It helps to know where you want to go, what you want to do, go to different conferences, meet people, exchange, so that that person thinks of you or actually, offers you a position if it fits within the project. So I would be very vigilant in terms of what kind of funding in France specifically versus other country settings, because I think funding procedures anywhere are very similar. There's an application process and selection, and then what you have to do with it. In terms of staying in academia versus leaving the academia after a certain time anyway, after acquiring the funding, our aim, at least at SIDAction, is to make sure that person stays in the HIV field. So whether he stays in academia or shifts to industry or goes on to do something else in NGOs in another form is really not the question for us. So I think I'll stop there. In terms of if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sarawit. Naomi, you wanted to say something on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. So first, I should say that I had the pleasure of working with Sarawit as part of this SIDAction Commission. And it's really amazing to see the kinds of applications we get. And they're from people from all over the world, and people are really exceptional. But so just to add to that, the equivalent of, say, the equivalent of, say, the Leukemia and the Lymphoma Society in the US, or the lung society. There are lots of different charitable organizations in France, and they're really impressively financed, given the kinds of means that the public has in France. And almost all of those organizations give out grants, and they give them out nominally. So if you've done your PhD, as long as you have one nice paper, you can potentially be competitive for that kind of grant. And you would just have to know the lab that you want to go to, and then you apply for a grant and it's on your own name. The other thing that I would add in is that probably in the last five to 7 years, the system of global government grants, and it's an organization called the ANR, or INR in French, which is very similar to the NIH. Most of the people who get grants through that actually have money to hire people, either at the PhD level or at the postdoc level. And so then you don't even have to apply for funding through an organization, which can take about 6 months. You can just contact someone and say, would you possibly have financing? And with the INL system, many grants will actually have financing to bring somebody in. So I think that that's something to work out. And then the other thing that I think has really changed the face of European research is that if you come from a different country, you can get grants from the EU, the Marie Curie program. You just need to have not been in that country for over 9 months when you applied. So anyone coming from outside Europe, but also from inside Europe, can apply either for funding as a postdoc or can apply for something called an integration grant, an external integration grant, or an internal, if it's coming from a different country in Europe. And that's really a very nice means of actually funding some of your research. And I think that the deadline for that is 3 or 4 times a year, the last time I looked. So there really are lots of different options for that. But the Marie Curie program, because it's so well paid, and it's almost twice the salary as to other programs. In fact, I had a postdoc who was paid by the Marie Curie, and when she got a tenured position, her salary actually went down by 1/3. So it's just to say that it really is a wonderful way of coming to Europe. It's really something to think about, and it has really kept excellent scientists in Europe. So I think it's a remarkable program in terms of fostering exchange between different countries.
And as Lydie said earlier, it's important also to mention that this European program is also eligible for being hosted by companies, and especially for PhDs interested in doing this transition from academia to industry. It can be a real good opportunity to do this transition because you got this fellowship and you will be hosted by a company. And good to know the success rate if you apply for Marie Curie fellowships by being hosted by a company is actually higher than if you are hosted by an academic institution. So it's good to know this fact. Also, success rate, it's also a major factor for funding and for further career development. I would like to move, to the last question, because you already mentioned about selection committees, applications, and of course being evaluated and being funded. So my last question is about recruitment process. I would like to know from the recruiter's perspective, but also from the candidate's perspective, for instance, like you, Mathura, I would like to hear more about how you recruit researchers in your own institution. Maybe we can start with the academic institution in France. So Naomi, can you start and explain how it works in France, this recruitment process, and also tell us what you are expecting in terms of profile, skills, but also any other requirements you want to see when you recruit researchers?
So I think there are 2 different questions of recruitment. One is a recruitment within someone's lab, so as a PhD student, as a technician. Most technicians in France are called engineers if they have advanced training, or a postdoc as compared to a national recruitment through a university or a national organization. So I'll talk about just recruitment through my lab. In general, what's worked for me is that people usually contact me because they're interested in coming to the lab, they're interested in the topic. I think that it's like anywhere else in the world. If someone's actually read through your papers, if they're interested in what you're doing, if they know what they're talking about, you're more interested in speaking to them. I think it's always interesting if people have what's called a good CV, meaning several good papers. And when I mean good papers, it's not a high profile paper, but it's a paper that if I read it, I find it's really interesting. I think we need to read the papers that are submitted from our candidates and not just say it's a paper in Nature Cell Science. So that's quite important. And then I almost always get on the phone with people who I would be interested in. And I think if people are good, it's not a question of, it's a question of what they can bring to the table and what their interest is. I'm looking for people who are motivated, who are interested in thinking about a question, and not necessarily slave labor, but somebody who's going to add to the common interaction. As I've always said, I have 3 kids, and I spend more time with people in my lab than I do with my kids. So it has to be in an environment where we're all happy to come in every morning, or at least almost every morning. So I think it's someone who really is excited about science, who's interested in bringing science forward, and who's willing to put the effort and the motivation into doing that. So I think once that happens, then you can always find, maybe I'm being a little bit too glib, but I think it's the hard part is not finding the financing. As long as people are motivating, it's finding a match and making sure that things can can go forward. Afterwards, to try to get from a position like that to a permanent position or a tenured position, that requires some luck because the chance of success is much, much lower. So that's a different story to have the kind of position of a tenured lifetime position within academics. But for a postdoc, for a PhD student, I think contacting people who you're interested in and showing why you're interested in coming to them is always the best way to go. And I've had very good luck from that. I've also had students who've come in through the Erasmus program, which is a program that's sort of the sort of Marie Curie program. It's a program of most universities where in the 3rd or 4th year of the undergraduate or in the 1st year of the master's, students go from different countries. And that's a fantastic program because they come from 6 months to a year. So it's not a huge investment, neither on the part of the student or the part of the lab head, and it gets you a chance to see what kind of experience it is. And I would say, I think I've had a handful of students who come on those 6 months programs and who stayed either as a PhD student or as a postdoc, and it's always been really, really positive. One of whom was actually funded by SIDAction.
Maybe from the industrial point of view, the recruitment of PhDs or researchers, can you tell us more, Lydie?
Yeah, so on our side, because we are a company, we are more looking for specific mindset and personality than publications. For example, when you apply in a company, if your CV exceeds 1 page, we don't really take time to look at it, basically, because we are not really interested in the publications. We are interested in the person and the way the person can be synthetic also, even if the person has a lot of achievements, she should be able to resume everything in 1 page. So the 1-page CV is something of really of importance for us. As I said, so the thing is that we hire people mainly through fellowships, either Marie Curie individual fellowships, and for a PhD student that we hire, it's also with the Marie Curie funding ITN. So there are some rules to be respected, mobility rules. So we generally recruit foreigners. And the process is the following, is that if you have a right CV and the technical aspect is fine, then we go more into detail into the personality and the mindset, because we want to be sure that the person is applying in the company because she really wants it, not because she just wants to make a test and send a CV to see if it works or not. We really want the person to know why she wants to apply in a company. We want to be sure that she really wants to transition from academia to industry. We have a lot to offer, but we want to offer it to people really willing to receive this, because if you come in a company and you are not ready for that, and you are not expecting exactly what is going to happen, if you are thinking that it would be like in an academic lab, you can be disappointed. And as Naomi said, okay, on our side in the company, our career it's not done, but we are working on a day-to-day basis, but your career is not over, and it's just that you made it wrong and you feel bad. So the main aim is for us to be able to identify the right candidates. We really want to be sure that the person that is going to come really know where she's coming, and we want to have somebody who knows exactly what he wants. So that's why we provide candidates with a questionnaire to assess their mindset, their personality, to see if there is a fit between their mindset and the company's mindset, because also we are a young company, still like a startup. So you can have access to many things. Things are changing really rapidly. So we want to assess the capacity of the person to adapt to a changing environment. So it's really going deep in the personality. And then once the person has replied and if everything's okay, then there is a quite long process, I would say, but there are Skype meetings with the recruitment people to know exactly why the person is willing to come to Elvisis, particularly. If she has something specific she'd like to develop with us, how we could help this person, what she wants to do in the future, to see really if the company is the place where the person has to be. Then there is a Skype with the human resources. Then there is also, of course, because we cannot let down the technical aspect and the technical skills, there is also some technical test inside the company if the person can come, or a practical test via Skype. We have a procedure for that. And then there is the final Skype meeting with the CEO and the deputy CEO. And the person who takes the final decision, of course, is the CEO. So it seems like it's a quite long process, but it's a process that has been matured a lot in order to really find the best candidates, meaning not the highly skilled, of course they need to be highly skilled, but more the right candidate on the mindset point of view, people to be happy in the company and people we would be happy to work with.
Thank you, Lydie. Mathura, you wanted to say something on that topic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to add on to Lydia's points, and I'm not too much involved in the recruitment process, but just to add on to that, I think, first of all, obviously the attitude really matters when you come to the industry. It's a very different perspective from being in academia. But what I really wanted to highlight is that there's no, of course, there are new skills you might develop as you're in the industry, but even during your PhD, publications they're not something that industry looks at very keenly, but definitely gives you the skills, just organizing experiments and just planning things out, your scientific thought that goes into it, your perspective, your scientific writing skills. All of these are something very important in the industry, and they translate to, a different role perhaps, but it's something, you get all these transferable skills in your PhD, during your PhD. And I think I just wanted to highlight that it's a lot of very similar things that you still do in academia and in the industry, but it's a little bit of a different function. You have a lot more of a multi-functional role perhaps in the industry, but there's a lot of very, very transferable skills. And even they may not look per se at each publication or the list, but I think a lot of the things that you get through that is very vital to also being a scientist or a scientific function in the industry as well.
I don't know if Sarah Witt, you want to add something on that topic, because I suppose as scientific director, you may be involved in such recruitment when you recruit new staff. Can you tell us more about how it works at SIDAction, or what is your perspective on that?
I think that a lot of things were said that I agree with as well, that looking for the right skill for the right job. I think in recruiting people with scientific backgrounds in an NGO setting where research funding is an aspect, and also communication and relationship with the public probably looks out for a different type of skill sets in addition to the scientific background. By that, I mean, for example, in SIDAction, there are about 45 employees, and those that have gone through what the biomedical science, I think there are 2 or 3 of us. So, but the person I recruited about a couple of years ago, for example, in my team, was an immunologist by training. But in addition to her being an immunologist, what really made the choice was the fact that she had communication skills and writing skills that was a little outside of the scientific writing skills, meaning she could translate basic science information to a wider public. So in our setting, that's very important, because we definitely make sure we communicate more, and we communicate within our environment, closed environment, because not everyone reads the primary literature that's listed or referenced in PubMed. So those are really important issues. But I also reiterate, of course, motivation is a key, because we can have all the right skills, but if the person doesn't really take the issue by its horns and really makes it her business or his business and push it through, it gets complicated, and it probably even more so in a setting where you feel alone because you don't have another scientist to echo your ideas of, particularly. And I think that I would share, it would be similar to any other NGO settings, because you draw on exactly, as I said, on your scientific skills, but also on your person and your capacity to go and above and beyond in different settings.
Okay. And maybe before giving the floor to participants, a last word from you, Naomi, because when we discussed to prepare this panel discussion, communication skills was also plays actually a key role in the selection committee in which you were involved. Maybe can you tell us more about the process in research institutes in France when it comes to recruiting researchers for permanent position, and what you're actually looking for when you recruit researchers?
So I should say I was actually on these committees. So the way that recruitment works at the level of a postdoc fellowship, or even for many PhD fellowships, is that you actually write a proposal, and it's based on your written proposal on letters of recommendation. But the position for a tenured spot, either at a university or in a research institute, and almost all research institutes are attached to universities, but the tenured positions are actually given by global national organizations. So in biomedical sciences, it's INSERM, in basic sciences and social sciences, but also some biomedical sciences, it's CNRS. There's the COA, which is the Atomic Energy Commission, which also has a lot of both basic and translational research, as well as INRA, which is agricultural science, but also has lots of things outside of that. Those are all national competitions. And the way that it works is that you actually have to apply to go to a specific institute or to a specific lab. You can have tenure in France without being head of a lab, which is very, very different from any other country that I'm aware of. I think it also accounts, and we can talk about this later, it accounts for the fact that there are more women in academic science in France, and you can actually apply for this position within 5 or 6 years of having a postdoc. In France, you can't start a lab without having tenure. So in order to get one of those positions, you actually have to write a project, or you have to write how it's associated with an institute or with a specific lab. And then based on that project and based on the level of your publications, and that's clearly a huge thing, you have to get through that first step, which is actually getting selected for an oral presentation. But I would say that once you get selected for that oral presentation, really what counts is how you present your project and how you answer questions. So for almost all of them, you're giving a 10 to 15 minute presentation on what you would like to do for the next 5 to 6 years. And then you have to be able to show the breadth of what you're doing in responses to questions. And that is hugely important. And sometimes I think I wasn't completely comfortable about it, because I think we end up in some ways selecting for a specific phenotype of someone who is a good communicator and who can answer questions, and who can answer questions very quickly and on the spot, right? Whereas that's not necessarily the only thing that we're looking for in an excellent scientist, and someone who's thinking through questions, who comes up with the most imaginative questions possible. And so, you know, every system has its good points and its bad points, but within the French system, because of the fact that your ability to answer quickly to questions that are coming at you all the time, and to show that you're on top of what you're doing, is a huge part of being able to get a position. That's something that's important. In our institute, we actually set up a system where anybody who was a candidate would go through practice talks, would go through numerous practice talks. And I think that that's incredibly important, because it's not the sort of thing that you just show up to and get. You really need to have the practice of seeing how you respond to questions. And in a sense, you know, you do it every time you do a lab meeting, but you just have to realize that the people who are going to be listening to you here are from a much broader base of individuals, and they cover quite a large number of different topics. So even, for example, if you're doing something on HIV or immunology, you're going to be in a commission that's going to cover immunology, hematopoietic stem cells, different viruses, different bacterial infections. So you have to be able to make your project and your response to questions appeal to everybody, the 20 to 25 people who are on the committee. And so it really is a very specific type of exercise.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Naomi. So as I said, we are going to move to the question part with participants. So to do so, I would like to ask our participants to write their names in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I will give the floor first to, sorry if I speak badly your name, but Ruben, if your mic is on, you can ask your question. Ruben?
Oui, bonjour.
Bonjour. You can ask your question.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for this presentation. Actually, I was interested about Madam Taylor, Naomi, because I did my PhD here in Montpellier. I just finished my thesis at the end of December 2019. And actually, I am now seeking for a new opportunity. I came to Montpellier by, I am a Syrian nationality, and I came to Montpellier by Erasmus program, Mondes program. I had fellowship from Erasmus program. Then I hopefully finish my PhD in microbiology and biotechnology. So then I started to see now what kind of job opportunity I could have. First of all, I like to find something at Montpellier because I like this city also, and I am looking for postdoc or maybe on academia to teach, because I had an experience before I'm coming to France by teaching at the university. So it's not easy. Just I want to say it's to find the exact opportunity also, especially in this time, because we have now the COVID-19, which is very, it's influence all the opportunities maybe. So what advice would you give for us, like a PhD holder, to how to define also the objective of the research at the first time?
So I think that question was to me. So first of all, congratulations on finishing your PhD. I would say that I think as we said before, the most important part, and I think Liddy said it really well, the most important part is trying to sell yourself in a way that shows that you would be a fantastic candidate for the kinds of labs that you're looking into. So I think what that means is spending a lot of time looking into the research of the people who you might be interested in, reading their papers, and then writing to them and saying that even if they don't have something available right now, you'd really be delighted to hear about their research, and that you have specific questions, and would they have a half hour to an hour that they could spend speaking with you, even if they don't have something available right now. I think that gives you a foot in the door and allows you to really make your case in person, which is much easier than making it over email or even on the phone. And just to say that if they have no monies available right now, or if they don't have a position available, you completely understand, but you are so excited about the kinds of things that he or she were doing that you would really welcome the chance to be able to meet them for half an hour and an hour. And most of us have such big egos that someone says that to us, we're always willing to say yes. And I'm only a little bit sarcastic when I say that, but really, you know, egos aside, we do this job because we love what we do. We are passionate about what we do, and we love to talk to people about what we do. So if you're looking for an academic job, I would really say, read the articles that people you're interested in have done and try to set up a meeting to talk to them, whether or not they have a job available or not.
Thank you, Naomi. Just an information for participants who want to ask some questions. Please try to be concise and precise when you ask your question, because we want everyone asking their question. So please keep that in mind. Be precise and concise when you ask your question. Next one will be Anissa. Anissa, you are...
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for this Zoom meeting. It's very helpful. So my name is Anissa, and I did my master and PhD in France at Nescachon. And then I came here to Boston for a postdoc at Harvard Medical School, but I was willing to come back to France. At the meantime, I got married to an American, so my plans are a bit confused for the moment. So in the long term, I want to be in academia, get a PI position. I think I really like academia in France. The environment is very different and I like the teamwork. And my question is, I was considering to apply for fellowships, but they are highly competitive. And my question is, what are the advices to optimize the success rate when I will apply? Thank you.
Probably give it a go at this one. I think the fellowships are competitive. I agree, but I want to make sure and to understand to be able to answer your question. You're looking for a fellowship for a postdoc position.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to assume you're looking to come back and do a second postdoc. So in France, there's a law that passed in 2012 where postdocs or PhD students could only be in temporary jobs, CDD, for 6 years. So if you're coming into the country after X many years, you have the advantage of not that counter being resetted at 0. Which is probably not the case for someone who's doing a PhD and following on his postdoc, depending on what city, what university he's working on. But in terms of the fellowships, I think you have FRM that offers retour postdoc fellowships that you can look into. If you're working on HIV, it's something that you could apply to us depending on what lab you're going to. Of course, like I explained earlier, you also can definitely look at what exactly we've been talking about, making sure you contact the right people, and what labs and what city you want to go back in, and build a project with them and see if they have a spot. Noemi, probably you have more to contribute.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Sarah Wheat's comment that, fellowships are difficult anywhere, but I would say that the fellowship success rate in France is not so bad. Many of the charitable organizations have success rates, and I've been on many of these committees, have success rates of over 20%, and some is actually at 25%, 25 to 30%. So depending on what kind of fellowships you're applying for example, from a cancer institute, as Sarah Wheat mentioned, from the Medical Research Foundation, or FRM, is over 25% for postdoctoral fellowships. For AFM, if you're looking for work on genetic diseases. And I think the most important part of all of this is, yes, you at least need to have one first author paper, but once you're at that point, it's important to see how you put together that program together with the lab that you're going to, and you need to get help, and you need to get advice from the lab group that you're joining, because nobody in France applies for a postdoctoral fellowship, and I think it's true in the US as well. You don't apply for a postdoctoral fellowship without being associated to a specific lab, to a specific PI. So I'll just leave it at that. But the success rates aren't so bad.
Laila, you have a question.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
First of all, sorry for my English. I'm not really good, but I'm trying to improve myself. So my question is, I have been already a PhD student in my country, but for almost 3 years. And it doesn't go well because I didn't have funding. I was funding my study myself, and the problem is the biggest problem is about analysis. we had a problem in analysis. I mean, the materials wasn't good, and I didn't get results. So I decided to stop. And I'm always motivated about research, and I decided to look on France, because I speak French very well, very well, and also because I know a lot of people in French doing research in my studies, my field. So I'm thinking there is a problem, is that the fact that I was doing a PhD before and I didn't get results and stuff is going to be a big problem in my
I don't know if the speakers could hear the question, and especially at the end, but what she wrote in the FAQ
Did you
box
get my
is,
point or not?
so the idea was she stopped at some point to do a PhD, and she wrote, is it actually a problem to start once again a PhD in France? So that's what I understood from the question written in the box.
No, I think for all the reasons we just discussed, I mean, if you have a project, a lab, there's no reason why you cannot restart a PhD program. You cannot continue what you started in another country, but you definitely can start a project.
Next question is...
It's complicated though, because it's complicated to get fellowships for a PhD, especially after you've done a certain number of years and a certain age. Unlike US, where you're not allowed to ask about age, in France you are allowed to ask about age. So there are differences there culturally. But I do think that the ANR system is interesting, because I think that one of the best ways to do that is to try to think about applying for a biologist position in a lab as an engineer. And then if that works out well, oftentimes you can switch that money from an ANR into a PhD salary. And often it's interesting for the people who have the grant, because a PhD salary is actually less money to pay as a head of a lab than a biologist position.
Next question, Sophie. Sophie Mission.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you. So I was wondering about what the speakers think about this phenomenon that has been happening lately in the research environment in France, because I've been following this and I see that researchers and PhD students, postdoc students are complaining about the deteriorating of the environment of research. They complain about the funding and the work conditions. So since you are in the field, you are there, what do you think about it? Is it this alarming, or can we still have hope in joining the crew? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want someone specific to answer, Berenice?
No.
Okay. I think the environment in France, in terms of what you just said, I think it's quite tense. It's tense also in the medical fields. There's a lot of protests around the public healthcare system as well. I think it's not isolated, because I think in terms of funding and in terms of opportunities, it's been tense for several years. But I also think it's a paradigm shift question. I think it's probably very isolated in this analysis. But I think the French system was been very much structured in terms of labs get certain types of funding without necessarily having a project-based funding, which was started about 10 years ago. And that also has put a lot of strain on labs that have to be applying on a continual basis for projects to be able to recruit people. And I think it's probably linked as well with people being expecting or aiming for a lifelong positions. So you do X many years, so you're a student, a postdoc, and then you have a lifelong positions, which is obviously a very, very good and I mean, incomparable to other settings, but it also puts the expectation on everybody that says, well, I've been in the lab for X many years and I need to have a fixed position or a SADE. I think that the thinking would have to be, it will have to change, but it's not going to be easy because those expectations are also linked to the fact that if you don't have a permanent position, you can't get any, you can't borrow money for your home, you can't do this and that, so you don't have a stable life. And so that stability is linked to this type of positions, and that feeds off itself. And I've looked at the statistics where this kind of environment definitely does not invite or anyway encourage young people to get to work on their PhDs or any way to decide to get that in that field. But then work has been opening up, meaning you have academic positions, you can go to the industry, you can go to NGOs. It's about also looking at your opportunities differently. So you can definitely say this is hard, this is complicated, and it's not inviting at all. But I think that there's more to it than just the statistics that are shared.
Thank you, Sarawit. Next question will be for Vinicius. You're on. Yeah.
Hello. Are you hearing me?
We can hear you.
Okay, nice. Okay. My name is Vinicius. I'm from Brazil. I did my PhD in France, in Telecom Bretagne. So the question is that I am a professor here in university, in the Federal University here in Brazil. I have a permanent position. It's a job for life. However, in Brazil, we are having some problems because of the fundings. The government's cutting all of the research money, the grants and the students. So and also, so I would like to change to come back to France, in fact. But it's very hard to find a position. I'm not looking for a permanent position in France. I can do all over again. No, I'm not. This is not the point. The question is that I cannot find. I don't know where to find. I don't know where to look for jobs position. I can also change to the industry. I can also go for research assistant. So I just want to know where are the best places to look for, you know, or to contact. And this is the question. So thank you.
I can possibly answer a little bit for academics, and maybe Lydia Sarawit can answer for the private sector. For academics, there are, especially because you're already a professor, there are a lot of different programs to bring in people internationally. There's now in many universities something called LabEx, or a Laboratory of Excellence, and many of them have monies to bring in international scholars, so you wouldn't need to give up your position. If you wanted to come and try something for a shorter period of time, you could probably get funding for a year to be able to come to try out a different program as sort of, you know, a international guest, sort of like a sabbatical kind of position. And those exist in lots of different places. Again, I think the same sort of comment that I made before is actually trying to identify where you would want to be based on people who you'd want to work with would make your life simpler, because then you could reach out to some of those people. Almost every LabX, so LABEX has a website. So if you look at the different LabX programs in France, or in the difference of IHU, so the University International, what does IHU stand for? It's like a hospital university institute. So it's a research and hospital put together. And so those sorts of organizations and those have monies to bring people in. So I would highly recommend trying to see based on what you're interested in doing, and then identifying a LabX or an IHU that might be interesting, and then contact them and to see if they would have anything available for someone who's coming in as an international professor. There are lots of those sorts of things available. If you'd like, you can feel free to email me and I can try to see specifically based on what you're interested in.
Maybe for industry, I don't know if Mathura or Lydie, you can add something on this industrial part of the question.
I guess I can have some info about this famous, again, Marie Curie Fellowship, individual fellowship, because this is the one that we mainly have in the company. So of course, this fellowship is also open to experienced researchers, associate professors. There is no limit in age and in experience, I would say. It's just a matter of credibility of a project. For example, so we are a company specialized in microfluidics. I don't know about your background, but imagine that you have a great idea and a great project that could fit both the company and your skills. We could apply together, and if funded, you could come for 2 years working in the company. So this is also one possibility, knowing that it would be like a transition to industry. Of course, with in your case, you would be able to go back to academia in the end with new skills and maybe the ability to create your own company in Brazil, maybe, depending on your will. So it's, I guess, really up to you. But there are opportunities in academia and in industry for you to come in France, but you clearly need to know what you want to do. There are several fellowships, but of course you need to decide academia or industry, and you need to be clear about the kind of project you'd like to develop, because it would be to enhance your career. So you need to have clear objectives. That's the main point, I think.
Mathura?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to, I think there's obviously lots of opportunities in academia and even fellowships for industries, but there are also these scientist positions that you have in industries, which is not essentially a fellowship, but it's really, you know, an industry position. So you can either go as a scientist, so you're still doing bench work and really the science that you would normally do in an academia. Of course, the research will be more focused on what the company's needs are. But then again, there's also other opportunities you can, look at in terms of medical affairs, we call them, or scientific affairs. So I would really encourage you to, if you're interested in the industry, to look at these positions, as scientists, lab scientists, or as medical affairs associated roles. And in my experience, I've seen a lot of people actually coming from academic backgrounds, even as professors, coming in, as medical directors, leading great projects and products, bringing it through the clinical trials and, bringing it to the market. So I think there's really a lot of opportunities. You can obviously look at academia, but I think if you're open to it, please do explore, I think, lots of industry options out there for your background.
Thank you. Pascal, it's your turn. Pascal, are you still here?
I guess he left the conversation. If I'm right, I saw somewhere, yeah.
Okay, so it will be then Pepe, if you're here.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the excellent discussion. You have covered like a wide range of topics. It was fantastic. My question is for Dr. Brooke, and I would like to ask you about what avenues are open to getting into scientific policy, and what early advice would you give to yourself, to someone young, basically. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks for the question. Yeah, getting into policy is a big jump if you're a biomedical science person, or if you're more closer to social science, probably a little easier. But in any case, at least in France, my personal experience has been going through INR, which is the National Agency for Research, was one step away from the bench, meaning I was managing programs, I was looking at the political aspect of things, and looking at the different actors. So I think one question to ask was, who are the actors? What is interesting in this, and what are my inputs, or how do I see things? So what are the objectives of the different strategies? So once I got to that and got even more interested into it, I think you also have, if you're not scared of going back to school, there's a lot of global policy programs, mostly are the master's programs that you can do either with Sciences Po in France, Paris campus. You can do it with the Rennes campus as well. If you want to do it in a more English environment as well, you have the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine that offers a different master's programs. So, and that of course opens up a different avenue of different contacts and also network. But I think it's a step-by-step process that will take quite some time. But if you're interested, it's easier. It could be done. And the other thing I think in France, if you really want to stay within the research aspect of it, not necessarily health related, is also working closely with what the CNRS does, and actually understanding the structure of research. Because it's not, I still don't get it all the way. Maybe participants would. Just knowing those are really critical and useful.
Thank you. Next question, Kashsa. I'm sorry if I speak badly your name.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Don't worry, it's Kaisa, but it's complicated. Thank you. I was just wondering, I'm an associate professor in Canada. I'm looking to do a sabbatical in France. It's been deferred until next year. And I was just wondering, other than the Marie Curie, is there any other funding that could be useful? I know a German colleague who got like a living stipend while he was in Germany, something along those lines to help. And a second part is, do you know if I'd be allowed to do any teaching or almost consulting? I enjoy, and I do a grad class in design of experiments, and I've kind of worked that into a half-day workshop. That's a good thing, kind of pre-conference. And I don't know if that kind of thing would be allowed while I was in France on a sabbatical type visa for a year, but I would enjoy doing that a bit to supplement my income.
So maybe I can answer that one. So first, congratulations. I'm sure it'll be a great experience. I think as I said before, I think that almost for sure that they're going to want to have you come in and do teaching. I've done a lot of teaching when I was in France, even with a CNRS intern position. They'll be thrilled to have you. The issue is that in terms of financing and how that works, again, I never got extra money for teaching just because it wasn't worth it, to be honest. But I think that, as I said before, if you talk to the people who you're going to be working with in that university, they may have monies available through these structures like LabX or through these new sort of university type structures. And it's really worth talking to the people who you'd be working with, because I'd say that in almost all cases it's available, and in almost all cases, all of these types of programs have monies available in order to give stipends to what they call distinguished guests. So hopefully you can fall into that, and especially if you're looking for sort of a living stipend, I think in almost all universities you have the ability to do that. I know in Montpellier they were offering this both for people who came in and came out through the program called University of Excellence. So again, I'm not sure which university you're at, but there are all these programs which really do have the financing to do that. You just need to find the right person to ask. And again, I think my guess is that there will be an international office, and try to talk to the people with whom you organize the sabbatical, but the international office should have information about that. In Montpellier, they certainly would.
Thank you. Next question, Cécile.
Hi, can you hear all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. So I did my PhD in the US and I got a Marie Curie Fellow to do a postdoc in Hamburg in Germany. Because I was told that finding a job right after a PhD was quite difficult, so that a postdoc would help me. But now I'm realizing that possibly after doing all my studies in the infectious disease, finding a job in something else than infectious disease could be difficult. Do you think it's the case, or do you think changing fields would still be possible? Without having to do a second postdoc.
Sorry, what field do you want to switch to? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've looked at different job offers that are on the market right now, and mostly they offer jobs in oncology or immunology, but not in infectious disease because the money is not there, obviously.
I think it goes back to what we were saying about how you market yourself and what you have to sell in terms of from your background, your expertise, and how you can apply what you know to the kind of jobs you're looking into. I think Lydie can add to it because it's probably a general switch.
Yeah, I did several switch, I would say, because I did a master in physiology, pharmacology. Then I did a PhD in immunology, and then after I had a postdoc studying skin microRNA. So it's more about the motivation you have for the topics, and also it's a lot of common techniques in topics. Basically, it's I'm working in a company where we are doing basically microfluidic tools to help researchers for their research. So it's one technique that can be applied to several biological topics, oncology or whatever you want. So I would say, of course, it's not just about a question about techniques, but as soon as you make bibliography on the topic and you have some skills, technical skills, and that you know how to do, I don't know, Western blots, PCR, qPCR, and immunochemistry. I mean, you can adapt those techniques to another topic, I assume. So it depends on the topic. It also depends on the way you sell yourself, I would say, and the motivation you have to also change. If you are keen on immunology, for example, and if you're interested in this field, you can simply show your interest in this field, reading some publications, and it's just a matter of interest, the will that you put. I think it's not just a matter of how many years you did in a field. You can always adapt things from one field to another. It's not closed, you know. I'm working in very translational. I'm a biologist of formation. Now I'm working with microfluidicists, so it's really. But I'm also working with physicians, physicists, chemists, and you can really enlarge your mind. And I think you can change a little bit, even if you've worked with infectious disease. If you want to go toward oncology, at least try, do what you want to do. And if you want to go to industry also.
Yeah, I've always said that a PhD is not giving you necessarily competence in one specific area. It's giving you the ability and the tools to figure out how to ask the right questions and how to figure out how to answer those questions, even if you have no experience in it. A PhD is really to open doors. It's not to say, I learned technique X, Y, or Z. So at least in my lab, that's what I really try hard for PhD students. The goal is to learn how to ask a question. That's what a PhD is.
Yeah, it's how to reply to a problem. It's more about problem solving, and the way you think to solve a problem actually. So you can transfer this skill to anything as soon as.
Mathura, you wanted to say something on that question?
No, I think, Naomi, Sarah, and Lindy, they really just did sum it up. But I did also want to say, many people that I know in the industry have definitely done very many therapeutic areas throughout their career. So, just reinforcing the idea that you really, as a PhD, you're not focused on just one disease state or, one genetic mechanism really that we're looking at signaling pathways or something. So it's really very broad than just the topic. So, like techniques, for example, if you go as a basic scientist or, as a translational scientist, all the techniques are transferable. You're going to do a Western blot for perhaps another protein or, PCR. But also if you go to like medical affairs, the strategies and the way we think and approach a particular topic is going to be what is important there. And it's not really about, what disease or, what products you've been working on. And also many people in industry, I think they do work across many therapeutic areas also. So I think it's important to understand that you don't have to silo yourself to just, one area just because you've been working on it, but really just expand it because you've learned a lot that is completely transferable. And really you can translate it in the industry very easily. And that's something actually that I think during the industry processes for interview, they actually look at how much you're able to communicate that. But you've learned other things that you can translate to use for something else. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maria?
Yes, hello, my name is Maria. I'm working now in France, but I have an engineering job. Before that, in my country, in Bulgaria, I was working in the university, in the biggest university, technical university. I have a PhD in informatics in semantic web area. And now I'm searching a position in the university because I have the position I have now in France is in research institute, and it's an engineering position that didn't fit me very well, but because I don't speak very well French, I agree with it. Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can. I don't know who wants to answer, Maria?
Sorry. So I have around 10 years experience in the university in Bulgaria, for example, but as assistant professor. And I miss the students, and I also miss to have my own project, to build my own project, because the way how it works is a little bit different from Bulgaria in France, because in Bulgaria you have small projects that you can build. You can build by yourself the small project. I think in France you have the ability to work in a big project, but the job is more, it is different.
Some advice maybe for Maria on that?
Well, I'd say it's a quite complicated situation. It depends on why you came to France. Also, maybe it's for personal reasons. So yeah, it's not simple. So I'm from a company, so I cannot really help on because you want to work in a university. But I would say that you need to enlarge your network. I think now there are a lot of opportunities that you can find on the web. So I think you can simply push the LinkedIn profile, try to search for nice offers. The ABG website is really great for some offers. So yeah, if you can try to communicate a lot with people and try to push a little bit through the network, I guess it's one of the options, because I don't know exactly where you can find some, because yeah, maybe the system is not adapted exactly to what you do. So as you say, in Bulgaria, you are working by yourself with students on small projects. Maybe you can try to search for something like this in France. Or if there is not such work and you have to stay in France, maybe you can try to find something similar. I don't know, I don't have specific advice. It's really complex situation, and there are many parameters that I don't have. But yeah, I would say to try to contact people and search on some web and contact the network maybe.
Next question, Audrey.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this very interesting meeting. I was wondering, what was the part of your network to get your different position along your career? And how do you manage it right now? And do you have any advice about it from your own experience?
I can share a couple of my experience that I had. So when I was doing my PhD also at Institute Pasteur, they had a lot of these workshops where we had, people coming in from policies to industry to really everything else, to just give you an experience on where you can use the scientific skills, and even to like from scientific writing to all sorts of different careers. And I think that gave me an opportunity to network with them and learn a little more about what I wanted to do. And I think the other resource that, now that we are all working, living in really a virtual environment, I think, make use of like LinkedIn if you're looking to connect with industry folks. And, like Naomi was saying, reach out to PIs or, labs and let them know about their interest. I think these are where you'll gain your network and really speak to fellow scientists and students and get to know the networks and what everyone is thinking about. And that's kind of, at least for me, how I have gotten a couple of things that I've done before. And, I've reached out to many PIs, just trying to learn about the research, getting opportunities to know about, when the PhD positions might be open there, or if I could go down for an internship perhaps. And at the same time, also reaching out to the industry folks to understand what these roles mean in the industry. I obviously didn't know what medical affairs was when I was doing my PhD, but I think as you start reaching out to people and learning a little more, let it be either the research or or a industry position, I think that's kind of how I've done it for my networking and how it's led me to my current role.
Yeah, I think I agree, Matura. It's about talking to people, so and saying what people have to offer. Because when I was switching from basic science to more research policy, I talked to a lot of people that were referenced, because I talked to my PI because of my interest, and she referred me to different people that I didn't know even had a foot into different fields. So and by being honest and really exchanging and asking and informing, you get people really, I mean, most of us want to help people who reach out, right? I mean, someone knocks on your door and asks if you can help him, you definitely try to move things around and hear what he has to say and try to figure out ways. And the other way, at the time when I was doing this, I didn't know anything about who to talk to. So knowing, being referred helped. And then if you're interested in a topic, there's a lot of information out there, right? You just Google it and attend to different webinars, and then you can narrow it down. And I think people are also would be more helpful if you come up, if you knock on their door with a specific question, right? Not just random information, but you actually tell the person what exactly you're coming for, and that helps. And then in terms of maintaining the network, I'm not a good person. I think the LinkedIn and things is not, I'm not doing it the right way. But I think others are doing it better.
Amélie, if you're still here.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little, but I hope you can hear me. So I'm a Master 2 student and also a PharmD student, so from pharmacist. And I really would like to go to a PhD in immuno-oncology, but my rank in my Master 2 is not as good as was expected. So it's really difficult to find for now for me a PhD position. And I'm wondering what position can I have without a PhD, but in which I could do science, like not just laboratory and just like, using your hand, but also using your brain without a PhD. And also, is it possible to take a break for 1 or 2 years to have some experience and then go back to apply to a PhD?
So maybe I can add a couple of things. So a couple of points. One is that I think most labs that I know do not treat a biologist or an engineer or an assistant engineer, which is somebody after a master's, as sort of just hands, but would really love to have them think about it. And I think if you make a good impression in a lab where you apply for an assistant engineer position, you end up being able to transfer that into a PhD if you're doing a great job. The other thing that I think is really worth looking at is the information on the internet, the early training networks for the EU program, so ETN or ITN, because again, most of them have positions for PhD students. They already have the position available, and you have to be coming from another country. So as long as you're willing to go to another country in Europe, you can see on their website, just look at the ETNs that have been approved for this year, and within every ETN, and there are quite a few in immuno-oncology, you will have offers for a PhD program. And those are spectacular. I've had students through that. I had a student from Poland in that. And it's not only great to be able to bring people in from another country, but because of the way that ITN is structured, you're asked to go to different countries, to different labs within the network to learn different techniques. So it's definitely challenging. There's definitely a lot to do, but I would say that looking at some of these ITN networks is a really good way to go. And the other thing is to think about an assistant engineer position in a lab that has an ANR, and say that you're interested potentially in doing a PhD, but you'd like to see what it's like and get more experience. And that will give you an in and try to be able to see how that might work. So those would be the two suggestions I would have.
Yeah, and I can complete a little bit because we at Elvasis are part of some ITNs. We also have some running in the company, and we obtained funding for some, and we are going to enter the recruitment phase. So if you like, you can contact me after the webinar so that I can give you information. It's not only industrial position, but it's also academic position. Inside the consortium, so mainly academic position. So I can share also this if you like after the webinar.
Anna?
Hello, actually Cecile and Amelie already asked the question I wanted to ask, but still I'm wondering for another technical thing. You've been mentioned about the grants like Marie Curie project for those who are coming from abroad, but are there any kind of grants for those who are already in France to apply to French positions? Hope everything is clear.
I think it depends on how long you've been in France and what kind of fellowship you're applying for. But again, through the charitable organizations, I think you just have to look at what's available. And again, if the easiest way to do that is to identify a principal investigator, a PI with whom you want to work, and use him or her to help you to see what options are available, or to apply to several PIs. But I think looking at that sort of thing without identifying a PI is much more difficult than if you've identified a PI.
And there will be one last question, and then we are going to conclude this workshop, which is a bit longer than expected. I'm sorry for that. Pepe, it's your turn, if you're still here.
Yeah, hi again. Again, thank you very much for this incredible session. I have two questions for you, Professor Taylor. The first one refers to the comment you made about starting a lab without tenure. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. And secondly, as a person that probably has written a bunch of proposals, would you mind giving your personal advice on writing a successful proposal within the French system, please?
So my point just was that in the US or in many other countries, you get an assistant professor position to start a lab, and 5 to 7 years later, you're evaluated on what you've done, and then you come up for tenure. In France, you can't start a lab before having tenure, and you can actually have tenure without having your own lab. So the laboratory that I had, I actually had 4 people with tenured positions who are working within my lab. So it's an interesting position because you're the boss without being the boss, because basically these people are independent. They have positions that are paid for the government. So basically you want to do your best to make them happy, not that they want to do their best to make you happy. So it's an interesting situation. It really is a way of putting people together. In terms of writing grants, I think that each grant has a bit of a different program. I think that there are lots of different programs about how to best write grants and to get training in grants. I think that the French system is interesting because usually the grant proposals are less long. Sarah, we can maybe speak to this. And so it's maybe less detailed than what you would see in an NIH grant proposal. And so going the other way has been a bit challenging for me in terms of that as well. And I had written some NIH grants when I was in France. It's not exactly the same thing. But again, I think that identifying people who can help you, most people, if you say to them, can you read through something I wrote? I would like to present this as a grant, and I would really like your comments. Almost everybody will say yes to you. Use people. For almost every young person who's writing a grant, I think it's really important to put into position a mentoring committee, which means that people are going to be reading your grants and critiquing them. You want people to critique them. I still try to get people to critique everything I wrote. We all get better with having people help us. So that's my answer to that.
I think just to add to that, it helps also knowing the funder, what he's looking for. I know a lot of applicants don't read the call for proposal document, but you have really interesting and important information in those, because not all funders are looking or applying the same policy. So knowing those keywords and knowing and how you frame your question is really important. Because we receive, I mean, it annoys the committee when we receive certain applications that was not written for us. It's just cut and pasted from a different funder. So that's a no-no.
Great, thank you very much for your participation, our speakers. Just maybe to finish and to conclude, I would like you to tell us just in one word, some advice, one advice in one word you can pass on to our participants. Just one word to finish this session. We start with you, Lydie.
Yeah, one word will be complex, but maybe I would say motivation.
Thank you. Mathura.
One word about, I guess, my experience in France and PhD is, I think, enriching in both the personal and a very professional sense.
Thank you. Naomi, in one word.
So I'll use 3. One is an and. I agree with everything that was said before, so it makes it easier. I would say stay open-minded and passionate. This is a job that requires passion.
And Sarah Witt, your turn.
I can't do those one word either. I think perseverance is important, and also following your inner heart.
Great, thank you very much. I would like to thank you all participants and speakers for this workshop. As I said, it lasted a bit longer than expected. So thank you very much for your patience. I hope it was really useful for you participants. It was a pleasure for me to host you as a speaker, and I hope we keep then in touch. And I wish you a very nice evening, and maybe see you then in France or in any other countries or cities we could meet. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.